brands are starting to act like NGOs. I mean, they have such potential for impact. We see things like Tesla in Puerto Rico, where there's just real infrastructure impact. But what you don't see is you don't see a lot of commercials from Tesla about that impact.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Limore Shur, the Chief Creative Officer at Modop. Limore,
That's right.
It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about the merging of Modus Operandi and the agency you founded, Eyeball, and how that all went down.
Let's start with the toughest question. Mergers are a thing to see happen. They are complex, and then when you add creativity to it, when you have creative houses, it adds a lot of complexity to it. What's interesting, certain parts of the merger really worked well, and other parts took 3-4 years to really settle. It's sort of like taking a jam band and adding a lot more musicians to it of different cultures. And the music just takes a while to find that rhythm, the way of going. We've really settled in a really good place, and I think it was worth the effort. I actually, for part of it, left to consult while doing my role to experience a lot of other things. I think it's important that we all grow, and my way has always been sort of throw into the fire. And so the time overall allowed us all to do a lot of growth and thinking and really refine what it is that we're doing. But mergers are not easy in general. I mean, there's a lot of complexities. And a lot of personalities and a lot of idiosyncrasies. And then when you start dealing with time, space, continuum of different offices and learning how to communicate and people not even knowing who's who, it takes a while. I mean, large brands have just as much difficulty. The whole time that we were merging, Nike was going through multiple iterations of who they were over the last 3-4 years at the same time we were. So it was interesting as having Nike as a client and going through our struggles and sort of feeling okay about them, because you'd be there and be like, man, these people are just what's going on with this? We've reorged 3 times in the last, but that's what you do. That's how you refine it. We're organisms. So I like when you say reorg, but you think a little differently about it. It takes a while for it, all of the things to settle and get in place and work really well together. And it's organic. I don't, as much as you could try to put a plan and process and strategy together, it's still coming from somewhere, and it's not going to align with everyone.
So how would you define the sort of culture of the unified entity now today?
We really focused over the last 3-4 years on trying to work with clients that we aligned our values with. And we put forth a new internal slogan for our agency, which was Make What Matters. And it's sort of a level of seriousness attached to impact or purpose-driven work. So whether working on sustainability stuff with Nike or working with WNYC or WQXR, brands that we really align with the values, or just being serious about the brands that we help, like Microsoft, about doing all of their internal screens at their flagship stores, that's also what really matters to them, and making sure that we're focused on that rather than getting our own ego or ideas or idiosyncrasies into it. We like to partner with our clients much more so than always leading, because we feel that there's been a level set on leadership, and that partnering really works better because there's so much domain of expertise in our clients, and it's well regarded to work at a brand now, whereas 10-15 years ago it was not even thinkable. There were a few brands like Target who were maybe the brands who were starting to get there, or Nike, that really engaged with that. But the culture is really focused around enjoying our work, having a good, friendly, nice place to work, but at the same time just helping our clients grow. Really helping it's not award driven. It's not hey, let's make the greatest thing that our industry applauds us for. It's no, we are a business helping other businesses grow. And that's what we're going to focus on. And if we can be highly creative about it in the execution, or if we can be highly creative about it in the process, it's still us doing our job, and also our passions get fulfilled.
You talked about growth a little bit earlier and sort of pushing yourself to grow. You have an amazing creative background, right? Everything from dance to computer graphics. Do you think that's been sort of a major element of your success? And do you think a lot of creatives have to be multidisciplinary, or how do you think having that sort of broad background has actually helped you with your client relationships?
It taught me more about creativity than it did about necessarily honing my own creative skill set in a certain area. For me, I've always been broad and multifarious because I did come from a family full of dance and music and choreography and storytelling and deep sort of artistic roots. So I also saw how creative people lived. I saw how my parents tried to make a living. I saw how performances came together. I sat in audiences. I saw how my family would engage in audience participation. All of those things opened me up, but I was also drawing and making music and all of those aspects. So I became almost a creative problem solver. Whereas I also admire an editor who's honed his craft to the point that that when you ask him to work on something, you're going to get brilliance back. Mm-hmm. So I think that it can be a positive and a detriment. I think somewhere in the middle is where it's not great. I think like you can stay broad and you have to know about all of your abilities as a multifarious creative. If not, focusing in on a craft or focusing in, like I'm never a creative director. I always have work with creative directors because I'm way too broad to be a creative director. I can execute, I can design, I can make, I can do, but like for your day-to-day leadership role on a specific brand and a project, the client also wants to know that that person is there always and they're not out here, they're not always generating new thinking, et cetera. So I think it's a balance. I would say for any creative, experience as many aspects as creativity. There's no reason that learning music isn't a benefit to editing or directing, or that I've seen so many musicians who've moved into our world and they bring such a different point of view, but also incredibly successful ideas and thinking about it because they're storytellers as well through a different sort of emotive musical path. So the more you can absorb, the more that you can try and task yourself and push and pull on yourself. Where are my limits? What am I good at? What am I discovering about myself I didn't realize? I think throughout my career, especially as an owner, I always elevated people out of themselves, like an editor who was a creative director. I've said editor like 6 times now, but like an animator who's actually a better editor, or somebody who's a better storyteller, or a director, an editor who's a director, or a designer who's actually got a real visual. So it was always working with people to extract from them, like, hey, you might be more than this. You might have done this because you found that you can make a living, but maybe you didn't realize that you could come out of that and find a stronger voice for yourself, or where your passion really lies was actually in sort of a new place that they might not have discovered. So I encourage it, but I'd say as you hone your craft, move one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. What do you think are the hallmarks of a good story these days, and where do you think we are on the continuum of binging versus sort of snacking as far as stories are concerned?
I think we get in trouble with platitudes, and I don't think there's any one thing. I think it all matters. Mm-hmm. I think great storytelling comes through, and I think it has the parts and pieces that we're familiar with, which is it has all the emotional hooks, it has whatever if it's humor, it's you're laughing like a lot. If not, it's not great. So like that's already a great divide. Like if we look at all of the content that's out there right now, we're literally at the medium is the message. You guys are ending up in some feed on a phone, and that's the message. What you take from it, be it parts and pieces or all of it, there are bombs going off thousands of miles away, and we're talking about media, and we're going to end up in the same stream. So as far as I'm concerned, there's either really clear storytelling, which is in the capacity of television, filmmaking, etc. And then there's marketing. And as far as I'm concerned, everything is marketing these days. Everything. From the packaging to the ads to the nutritional contents. Like everything's marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how we're speaking to our clients. That's how we're telling the story. So it doesn't really end here or there. But when it comes to storytelling and content, great stories. I think we're getting back to that point where creativity is going to be as accessible as it was when we had nothing. When we think back to being villagers and getting up every morning and dancing around breakfast or singing or chanting at nighttime to go to bed or to keep the spirits away or whatever it is, everybody was allowed to do it. And everyone made music and everyone participated. And it was at a time where music was just part of who we were and our culture and our expression. Even as animals howls or birds chirp. And technology is getting to the place right now with things like Musical.ly or whatever the app might be, or I just posted a beautiful video that I couldn't have edited better than my phone did because it was a memory. I took good pictures. So that was my contribution. And in the end, the content was decent. So what you contribute to it will be probably a little more narrow because technology is making it sort of ubiquitous that anybody can make a video show. Anyone can make an animation. Anyone can, with machine learning and AI, pretty soon we'll just be generating this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. At some point, it will just be a screen and everything's generated to fit my needs. You know, it won't even be original movies. It will just be pulling from all of the great content and AR and VR and model libraries and texture libraries and audio from the world. It'll probably make it for me. So at that point, it becomes the creativity is who built the algorithm or who made the, who figured that component. So I think like people like in music, they're like, I don't know how to make music anymore. There's all these people who can make their own music.
Creativity isn't necessarily linear though, right? I mean, like with a lot of these, these algorithms, we're sort of pushed farther and farther into our echo chambers.
Yeah.
And, new content or ideas or, whatever the case may be, doesn't necessarily penetrate that sort of chamber. And, I think, versus some of the old days where you might read a newspaper cover to cover and be exposed to things that you wouldn't normally maybe be interested in. Mm-hmm. Today, we're getting farther and farther away, from that. I wonder if you could comment on, your sort of views on that and, sort of taking personalization to the extreme.
Yeah, I think there are, again, I think there will always be people who personalize for themselves, who seek out the things that they're interested in and follow their desires and passions and opinions. And there are those who just take in whatever. And those will be the people who get the more and more narrow feed because they're just willing to just be fed the stuff. When you think about who wakes up in the morning and goes to certain websites to look through things and other people who are just like, whatever's in my feed. Right. So I think there will always be that. But I think personalization is just, again, I think personalization is powerful when it's done in a way that's authentic and generally shows that you get the person and you're connecting with them. Otherwise, it's just another variation of marketing that's personalization, but it's not. It's just like using tricks like somebody's name. And well, we used to send postcards out to millions of people every day. It's called direct mail. They used to put their name on it. So like, I don't think that means personalization. So I think it's just going to come down to who's got the deeper connection. And I think the brands that make the longer play on building real connections with their customers rather than digital, like sort of large swaths, like let's go grab them. Mm-hmm. I think it's like invest the time, build an audience, really build a deep engagement with them and listen to them and respond to them and open up those channels of communications and then start to really think about how you personalize within that context rather than like, oh, people are doing personalization, we should do it. Well, what does that even mean to you?
We're hearing more and more about, younger generations, especially wanting to align with the brands that they buy from, their values, their purpose, that type of thing. Yeah. How important is that today in marketing? And, we've seen successes, we've seen, some missteps. It's a double-edged sword. How do you counsel brands wading into that?
Don't do it as marketing. Just do it for real. Mm-hmm. That's all you need to do. the success of the stories, if you want to talk about the successes that you're having or the impact that you're having, it needs to come from the point of view of the impact, not from the point of view of the brand, if you want to talk about it. But if you're going to do it, do it. That's it. And find the right channels for expressing it, but don't port it over into channels that are filled with marketing and advertising and competing against that. And then tell the story of the results. What do you do? Like, you see these campaigns from big brands where they're, just, they're tear jerkers. They just like pull out the most, like, just beautiful moments in people's lives, and they're connecting with that. And then they present it to us, and we're like, wow, that was really cool. But then what? What did they do after that? Did they continue that mission? Did they continue to help people in that? Or is this just a marketing or advertising campaign? Because then I think you're just using it for marketing. And that, I think, is just like unnecessary. The other part is our world is dying. The earth is literally dying.
Yesterday was Earth Day. Yeah.
And yesterday was Earth Day. And brands need to do this if they want to stay alive. They're short-sighted if they're not thinking about the impact that they're having on the earth and the people that they're serving. And if they don't start bringing them products that are serve both purposes. And this is why you see millennials wanting to align with brands that have, sort of rhyme with their values. But at the same time, those millennials also have to be in the act of being stewards for the earth or for these as well. And their involvement in it needs to parallel in brands as well. Brands are starting to act like NGOs. I mean, they're really, they have such potential for impact. We see things like Tesla in Puerto Rico, where there's just real infrastructure impact. But what you don't see is, you don't see a lot of commercials from Tesla about that impact, right? Like they might throw it in there as part of what they're doing or something, but it's not like, look at all the Puerto Rican people, look at them crying about what happened before, and then we came in and then we put it out here as a 30-second or a 1-minute Super Bowl spot.
Right.
That doesn't work. Like, what works for me is the affinity I have towards Tesla because I know they're doing it, but I'm reading about it in the news.
Yeah.
And to me, that's way more powerful and way more legitimate. So I think absolutely every brand should get into having an impact on this world and helping people, because they make all their money from those same people, and they make all their money from the resources that the earth provides.
Limore, thanks so much.
My pleasure, man. Thank you.
That was Limore Shur, the Chief Creative Officer of Modop.